Greetings and thank you for coming to our second event of the Winter Lecture Series, The Art of Planting Bulbs, with the renowned gardener, Jacqueline. I'm Jamie Boyer. I'm the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Vice President for Education. And as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the New York Botanical Garden is located on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape Delaware people. We honor them and acknowledge their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. In addition to today's program, the New York Botanical Garden offers many different classes, workshops, and public lectures like today. These are in topics such as landscape design, floral design, gardening, and so much more. On February 27th, in the Mertz Reading Room, we will have Terry Spate, who will discuss her recent book, Black Flora. On March 12th, Patrick Sparrow will present Botany and Betrayal, the Scientist Turned Spy, in the Mertz Reading Room. And finally, join us in the Ross Hall for our final lecture of the Winter Lecture Series on March 27th with Cassie Banning, who will present her work, Three Gardens of the Coast of Maine. Okay, so now on to our special guest, Jacqueline, who fell into plants at the age of 28 and from there went on to become an internationally acclaimed garden designer and one of Holland's best gardening authorities. Jacqueline's client list includes some of the most prestigious public gardens in the world. In North America, she teamed up with Pete Odolph for innovative plantings at the New York's Battery Park, Chicago's Lurie Garden, and our own New York Botanical Garden. Her work across Europe and Asia ranges from Holland's famous Keukenhof to the Palace Haus ten Bosch in Nagasaki, Japan, and the Newport Bay Club at Disneyland, Paris. This morning, Jacqueline will give us a tour of her own garden, the Theetuin in Weesp, which is in the Netherlands. This garden serves as a testing ground for her planting experiments and showcases her beloved spring flowering bulbs. She'll also share visually rich examples of her planting combinations, projects including the Castle Garden in Germany, Het Park in Rotterdam, and a small park in Yokohama, Japan, and many, many more. So please take a moment to silence your cell phones and join me in welcoming Jacqueline van der Kloet.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thank you all for coming here in such great numbers. As Jamie said, I'm going to tell you something about the art of working with bulbs. And this is a picture of my garden in Weesp, the Netherlands. When I left from Amsterdam yesterday, the snowdrops were coming into bloom, the crocuses were just budding, and the narcissus already showed their foliage. And when you would come to my garden in April, you would see this image with many tulips in bloom. I'll tell you something more about the garden. The garden is situated on an island in a river just east of Amsterdam. I came here in 1986 after doing my studies to be a garden and landscape designer, and during those studies I met two men who also wanted to become garden and landscape designers, and together we went to see the gardens of England in the late 1970s. During those tours we experienced a new kind of combination, a nice garden with a tea house and a little shop to buy garden things and plants and things like that. And we thought it would be such a nice idea that once we are garden and landscape designers, that we find a spot of our own and make our own model garden, have our own tea house and have our own shop. And that was all materialized in 1986. And here you see The garden is situated on as I said, on an island. So the river is here around it. Then there's a dike around it. And then the only existing building was this building, which now houses a tea house and our 3 offices. On this side of the property are our houses, because all of the 3 families, in the meantime, they're living here. Here is a green and glass house, a little shed, and this is the beginning of our actual garden, with in the middle a pond that we dug ourselves. This is the design of the garden. I'm responsible for the garden, so I made the design and the plant scheme, and I have been looking after the garden ever since 1986, which means that I do most of the maintenance. Just one back. Yeah, here we are. So in the middle here is the pond. I have to get used to this. Over here, the pond, which prevents, when people come into the garden over here or over here, the pond with the hedge around it prevents you from seeing the garden in one view. So what you actually have to do is you have to start walking and discover all these borders by yourself until you have seen the whole garden, and then you can go out again and up on the dike and make a tour around the whole property. This is what the garden looks like in the wintertime, and I think this is always a very important image, because here you can see what a garden should be in framework. It should be have a actual center with hedges, with trees, with shrubs, and that it looks like this in the wintertime, and then all the other areas are more detailed areas with borders, like this. This is an image of the garden in June, and here you can also see how I designed the garden. I really like a very natural style, which means that perennials and shrubs are not planted in blocks, but I look at each area in the garden, whether it is dark and moist or more sunny and dry, and I choose plants that will do well for that area, and then I toss them all together like into big bouquets, and I plant them so that they will grow in various months of the season, so starting in April and ending in November. So each area at some point in the season has a particular attraction. Then further up in the season, it looks like this. This is more August, September, where actual shapes in the garden and textures will become visible. And this is like how I like it too, that you have some month in the garden with lots of color and other month in the garden with structures and shapes. But I'm talking here about bulbs, and I discovered bulbs when I had this garden about 7 or 8 years, and I was really happy attending it. And I was writing columns in a Dutch magazine about combinations of perennials in the various months. At some point, my columns were read by people from the International Flower Bulb Center, and they called me and said, well, we really like reading your columns, but you also always are talking about perennials, but nothing about bulbs. And could you write something for us about bulbs? And I said, well, I'd like to do that, but I don't know anything about bulbs. And then came an answer, we can help you with that. If you make a selection of the bulbs that you would like to use in your garden, we will provide them and you can do with them whatever you want. And then I thought, well, that might be a nice idea, because bulbs are the earliest ones in the garden to flower from like now, February on. So it will lengthen the season. So I made a whole list of bulbs, a far too long list, but I discovered that mistake only later. And then I thought, when I'm going to plant these bulbs, I'm going to do it in the same way as I have done that with the perennials. So looking at a certain area in the garden, choosing bulbs that will do well there, and then mixing them, and then scattering them in between the perennials, and planting them where they fall. And in that way, each area, the same as with the perennials, each area has different stages of flowering. So it begins in some areas with the snowdrops, which you see over here. Snowdrops, they like areas where it's dark and a little bit moist, and you have to plant them early, like at the end of the summer, because they tend to dry out very quickly after they have been harvested. So they are the first ones to plant in your garden. After snowdrops, there's time to flower for the crocuses. And crocuses need different circumstances. They need a lot of light and a lot of a more dry area, because if they're too dark, their flowers won't open. And it's very important that the flowers open early in the season, because when they're open, insects like bees are profiting from them. So here you see what they should be in February, March. And this is one of the Tommy's crocuses. And I have learned actually here in New York Botanical Garden, when I was there 20 years ago, that Tommies aren't eaten by the squirrels. So you might try them to see if that's true. We don't have squirrels in our garden, so I'm lucky. But and then after crocuses, there's a whole number of smaller bulbs that are very, very easy to grow, like these scillas, which is a star hyacinth, a very small blue flower that, when it feels at home in the place where it has been planted, it will multiply profusely. Here in my garden, they even seed and flower in the gravel pathways. Another early, nice flowering plant bulb is Keukenhof, Glory of the Snow. It's the same story as with the scillas. They multiply and seed, and then when they're all in bloom, you see like these blue ribbons throughout the garden, lining the pathways. But of course, there are also, other flowers. Anemones, also very, very easy to grow, and they multiply as well. And then for numbers, using numbers for various places, I would say all these small flowers, small bulbs, like the crocuses and the galanthus, the snowdrops, the scillas, and these anemones, take about 40 or 50 for a square meter, and then they can multiply by themselves, and they will flower for years and years to come. This is a combination of two spring flowering bulbs that flower at the same time. It's a grape hyacinth, a very pale blue one, baby's breath, and Ipheon, which I don't know the American name of, but it's a light, small bulb with starry flowers. And then there's the daffodils. They come in various species and varieties, early flowering, mid-season flowering, and late flowering. And these are amongst my favorites. It's February Gold, and I like it very much because it's a daffodil that's very strong. It's one of the earliest ones. It can stand hail and rain and frost, and it always stays upright, and it flowers for a very long time. This is my practice of how to use those bulbs. So for a certain area, as I told you, I look at various species, I put them together in a wheelbarrow, and then I mix them, like what you see here. And then I grab hands full of them and I throw them into the border, and this is the result. And then you see some of them lying rather close together, and other ones are single ones. But when you plant them when they fall, the result will be a very natural image. And of course, various flowering times, because like in this picture, you see narcissus and tulips and snowdrops and glory of the snow all through one another. Another nice daffodil is Jenny, white flowering. It can stand a lot of moist, and it's very nice in dark areas. Like in this, my darkest border is the one near the dike, where mature trees and shrubs have grown through the years, and this one does very well next to them. And then you see from a distance the result, the long ribbons of white flowering daffodils overlapping one another in flowering periods and make it a very nice show in April and May. This scene from another point of view in the garden, where you see a white narcissus sailboat, and on the other side of the pathway, the yellow ones, is Little Witch, which is a small sister of February Gold. It flowers a little bit later, and they make a very nice combination. These daffodils are among the last ones of the season. It's Sabine Hay. It flowers at the end of April, beginning of May. And it needs a little bit of shade, because in the sunshine it will be too brightly yellow, and in the shade it's more like pale yellow with that nice orange cup. And this picture also shows you a very clearly how you can see, because they have been scattered in between the foliage of the emerging perennials, that when they have ended flowering, you won't see too much of that mostly ugly foliage of the daffodils, because they are covered by the upcoming foliage of the perennials. And then, of course, tulips. Tulips are said to be quite difficult, but I have made a sport out of it to experiment with them. And through the years, I have experienced that if you plant tulips and maintain tulips by the right rules, that you can have a lot of profit from them. These are the first ones to flower. It's ice stick. It's some kind of a botanical tulip. And they have been in my garden from 2002 or 2003 on, and they are still there. And they come back each year in one of the central borders of the garden. By the rules that I just mentioned, I meant planting tulips deeper than normally, so 6 inches at least, planting them in not early in the season, but in mid-season. And then when they start to flower, you just let them flower, and at the end of the flowering period, you take out the old or the dying flower, leave the stem and the foliage as long as possible, and then you leave them alone. And then they will wither and get brownish and disappear between the surrounding perennial plants, like I just told you what happened also with the daffodils. This picture is from beginning of April, and this picture is the same border a month later, in May, when you see the occasional foliage over here of the tulips, but mainly the picture now is attractive because so many surrounding perennials are flowering. This is again the same border, but then 2 weeks later with other types of flowering tulips. And here you see a tulip called Jacqueline, not named after me, but someone else long ago, and Mariette. And together they make a very nice combination. I've tried in my garden to make a different color combination for each border to show as many examples as possible. So in a different border, the focus is more on white and reds with a single very dark tulip, Lady of the Night, Queen of the Night in between. And across from that, on the other side of the pathway, it's mainly yellow and white with a single red one in between, which makes connection to the border on the other side of the pathway. And then in the distance, like here, you see yellows and whites, but also orange ones. And that's this border. And I chose this combination over here because the existing shrubs and perennials here, they have dark red and lime green colors. And that's why the yellow and the orange tulips, and of course also the dark red wallflowers, go so well in this combination. Again, seen from another point in the garden, it's this combination of orange and yellow tulips in various varieties. And talking about numbers for a combination like this, I take about 8 or 9 tulip bulbs per square meter, and in this case, that's in 3 or 4 different varieties. The garden is large enough to make various color combinations. So this is again in another corner where whites and blacks and a little bit of blue of the camassia, the Indian blue flower, make a good combination. And the white ones also go again to the other side of the pathway where earlier in spring it was all yellow with a little bit of red, but now it's mainly white. And here you see already also the buddings of a bulb that comes after the tulips, which is an ornamental onion. Here still in flower, but in a later image you will see them in full bloom. And this is the stage, what I just said, that at the end of the flowering period, when the flowers, normally when tulips start to flower, they open their flowers, they close their flowers at night, and the next morning they open them again. When they don't close at night anymore, but have this image, at that point you cut the flower here and leave the stem as long as possible. Also leave the foliage as much intact as possible, and then you let them die and go into the soil again. And that thing about cutting the stem and leaving the foliage, that has to do with the process that takes part in the bulb itself. Then after the flower has been cut off, the stem and the foliage will soak up the light from the sun, and that means that the carbohydrate, which is in the plant itself, it will turn into sugar and it will feed the old bulb, and that will make a new flowering bulb for next year. Yes, the alliums, ornamental onions. They're also very my favorites, because once you have planted them, you have never have to look after them again, but they will come back each year after each year. And this one, Allium nigrum, has been in my garden for more than 30 years, and it has multiplied and multiplied. And it really makes a very nice show in May. I'm trying to look at the time because I'm... Okay, I'll just go on, and if it's getting too long, you just have to shout. So, ornamental onions. They come in all kinds of varieties. This is Allium beauregard, and I like this one because it has nice foliage. Most of the alliums, the tall alliums, they don't have nice foliage. They get brown, and they are a disgrace for the garden at that point when they're flowering. And unlike what you do with tulips and all the other bulbs, you never cut the foliage of the spring flowering bulbs. But you can do that with ornamental onions, because ornamental onions have a different lifespan than all the other bulbs. And they already have made a new flower for next year once they start showing the flower for this year. So they won't be harmed if you cut away the foliage. Here another view from that same border with Allium beauregard, and then later in the season it's Allium violet beauty, which is a rather new variety which multiplies very well and colors the garden at the end of May. There are also smaller, more delicate flowering ornamental onions, and one of them is Allium roseum, which is not taller than about a foot, and pale white, pinkish, very nice flower, which looks like this when it's at the end of the flowering period, because then small red berries start to form and they will spread, and so they will see themselves and make multiple areas in the garden beautiful with their nice flowers for next year. Another very pretty one is Allium schubertii, with huge flowers in two different stages. A small circular flower very close to the stem, and around that there are other a second flower actually which looks a little bit like firework. I also wanted to talk a little bit about easy bulbs that are good for naturalizing. I already said it's the crocus or the snowdrops that do that, but it's also the winter aconites. And luckily enough, winter aconites and snowdrops grow very well together in moist, dark circumstances. The winter aconites also can grow very well on themselves, like you see here. And they're about among the first ones to flower in February. For numbers, again, the same what I said before for the small bulbs, like 30 or 40 bulbs per square meter. Crocuses we've seen before. This is a very nice one, Cream Beauty, early one. And a little bit darker yellow one, Gypsy Girl, with brown stripes in it. But what all of you want is, of course, this. This is a field with Crocus thomasinianus, which has self-seeded over the years. And you see in the middle of this picture, it's a huge beech tree, which can give a lot of shade later in the season, but the crocuses are early enough to be able to flower, to seed, and to seed in a period of the spring when there are no leaves on the trees yet, so they catch enough light to be able to reproduce for next year. And then it's this image, what you see over here. Daffodils are also come in various varieties. Jack Snipe is a very nice one. W.P. Milner is a very nice one, about a foot tall, pale yellow one here amongst geranium perennials. And then there's Thalia for later in the season, the end of April. And again, Thalia it's the only bulb in this whole garden. It's a Belgian garden with lots of structures of boxwood. It's very green, very beautiful in the winter, and then suddenly there's these white Thalia narcissus, and they really make a very nice example of how to brighten up your garden in early spring. I also like this combination. It's various narcissus in between green and yellow leafed shrubs. And then again, this one, the latest one of the daffodils flowering, the poet narcissus, which grows very well in shaded areas. This is a variety of the anemones that I showed you before. The blue one, anemone blanda blue shades, which also will multiply over the years. And then grape hyacinths, which come in numerous varieties. And this is the broad-leaved grape hyacinth, Muscaria latifolium, which seeds profusely, and you see it here in a meadow with wildflowers. It's a little bit moist here, and grape hyacinths are amongst the ones, the small bulbs that almost grow everywhere, whether dry or more humid. They make big splashes of color. And that's also true for these ones, though they both can be a little bit invasive. It's bluebells next to bear garlic, which I think you can grow here in more natural circumstances. Very beautiful, but you have to beware that they can spread very much and make... Well, I'm sorry that I planted this bear garlic in my garden, because it looked very nice when it was still in one area of the garden, but now it's everywhere. And I have tried to dig it up, but I garden in a clay soil, and so as soon as I start to try to get the bulbs out, they break, and there are even more next year. This is still a nice image of, this is at Keukenhof, the big bulb garden in Holland. There they have also natural areas with these white bluebill hyacinths, and I like them very much. And also an easy one, the ornamental onion, which I showed you before, Allium nigrum. You can plant it anywhere, and it will come back for many years too. And then that's also true for the Camassia. Camassia is originally from the United States, a blue flower that flowers at the end of May. And here it was in a show in Germany where I planted a combination of these Camassias together with late flowering tulips and ornamental onions, purple sensation. And you see the repeating, what the English call ribbons of flowers going through these borders here. The Camassia also has a white variety, which even flowers a little bit later, end of May, beginning of June, and they also multiply profusely. So this is the image that you see in my garden again at the end of May. And then this is another smaller growing ornamental onion, Allium triquetrum. Triquetrum means a stem with 3 sides, and you can feel that when you touch the stem. Also very invasive, so don't plant this one. Among the last ones is this Allium unifolium, flowering in June. And these smaller growing ornamental onions, if you plant them in small numbers, like 15, 20 a square meter, then that will be enough for the years to come, because they also seed. And one of the last ones is Nectaroscordum, Bulgarian onion, which is very attractive to bees and other insects. And when it starts to flower, it looks like this, these small hanging bells. But once it's getting into seed, it looks like this. Very decorative. And then when the seed is ready, all the seed heads open and they spread everywhere. So this is one to keep in mind, which can be a little bit invasive as well. Bulbs in containers. I have experimented with that a lot too, and what I always like to do is to make various layers of bulbs. So in the pots on the right-hand side over here, I have just planted the first layer of bulbs, which is about here, and then I've covered it with sand. And in the following ones, like this one has the second layer of bulbs, and then it has been covered with sand, and the last layer is this one, and then that also has to be covered with, not with sand, but with compost or potting soil or something like that. A thing you have to realize by following this method is that the bulbs who are flowering at the latest, they are planted first. So they are in this layer. So that's for late flowering daffodils and tulips. Then the second layer, those are the bulbs for mid-season. Here I have used a certain variety of tulips, but it can also be grape hyacinths or mid-season daffodils. And then the first layer, actually the last layer, so the one on top, that has to be consist of the earliest flowering bulbs, so snowdrops or crocuses or scilla or Keukenhof. Then in the wintertime, I leave all these containers outside. I also use containers that can't freeze in the winter, so these are, they can't break. And then in the springtime, I have covered them with a little bit of cotton, and then they're along the entrance of our garden. And here you see the first layer flowering. It's with an early flowering crocus. And then the same containers, a little bit later in the season, you see the middle layer of grape hyacinths in blue, and the last layer with late flowering tulips. And then it looks like this. And in that way, I have had flowers from the end of February until the end of April, beginning of May. These are frost-resistant containers that we also own on the property, and I have filled them with also different layers of spring flowering bulbs. And to make them a little bit more attractive, I have seeded lawn seeds in between, so that when the first flowers are starting to flower, the bulbs, there's a little bit green in the background. Then this is when the first flowers have started to flower. So you see here botanical tulips, grape hyacinths, and other varieties of grape hyacinths. And in the same containers, I change every year. So I just try what my mood is. So in a different year, they can look like this. And this is with the crocuses have flowered here, and what you see here now is a combination of tulips, low-growing, big-flowered tulips, and a little bit taller-growing botanical tulips, which look much more delicate in between. So it's always a question of looking for combinations that not only look nice in colors or different colors, but also the shape of the leaves and the whole texture of the plants, which makes it then interesting. These are a different kind of combinations for later in the season. These are wooden tubs with spirea shrubs in between. So they flower more or less in the same time when the tulips start to flower. And these are tulips Sweetheart, which is a mid-season flowering one, so middle of April, end of April, and a later flowering one, which is called Tulip Evergreen, and that's a tulip that won't open, so it will be this green bud all the time. But I liked it because it's again nice for this mixture of textures and shapes. Then we go to the Keukenhof in the Netherlands, or the famous bulb garden. Normally when they advertise with it, you see an image like this, because the Keukenhof is the show garden of all the Dutch growers and exporters. And all those growers and exporters really like to have a smaller or a larger area on the Keukenhof to display their products. There's even a waiting list to get in line for some year when you will be able to show your products. And it has been so like this in like 1949. And then in 2004, there was a new president of the Keukenhof, and he was a young man, and he had alternative ideas. And he said, well, we've had this Keukenhof for so many years now, and it looks more or less the same each year. And I would like to try something else. And then he had learned about my work for the International Flower Bulb Center for a couple of years. And he approached me and he said, we are going to redesign a certain area of the Keukenhof, and I want you to make the design for it. And the key words are inspiration, innovation, and education. And so what they did is they cleared a whole area of the Keukenhof, and I got a free hand in it, and I thought up a couple of subjects, like a bridal area, because there are many young people who are marrying in April and May and come to the Keukenhof to have their pictures taken. But when you see a picture like this, it's all the attraction will go to the flowers. So I thought it should be more, there should be more balance in the area where I want something for the bride and groom. And other areas were, well, they looked like this. And it's overwhelming, but it's not something you get inspiration from to use in your own garden. So I thought it should be, there should be something different there too. But first to the bridal area, because it looked like this. It was some kind of structure made of pear trees under which you walk along, and then on both sides there are borders with a base of perennial plants, like early growing perennial plants, like these ones. It's Caucasian forget-me-nots, and it's pansies, and it's aquilegia and other things. And in between those perennial plants, there are 2 layers of spring flowering bulbs. And the first layer, so the ones the same as what I did in the containers. The first layer, so the one on top, is crocuses and scilla and glory of the snow. So they flower as soon as the Keukenhof opened in the second half of March. And then later on, there is a mixture of tulips and daffodils. These are early flowering varieties, Purissima and Apricot Beauty. And later on, so 2 or 3 weeks later, the same borders look like this, with later flowering varieties of tulips. Another area was a field where before the area looked like what I showed you in the first picture. When they opened up that area, there was lots of beautiful trees, but also lots of lawn. And I thought it would be nice to make a design with long ribbons of borders, 14 in total, and each ribbon in a different color combination and a different combination of species and varieties. And then, because this would be for a number of years to go, the idea was to link the combination of the colors to the fashion of that year, the colors that were used in the fashion of that year. So for me it was very nice, because each year I could think up new designs and experiment with combinations of bulbs in a base of perennials and small shrubs. So one year there was lots of pink and a little bit of pale yellow in the fashion industry. So I made up these borders consisting of daffodils and tulips in various colors, and in a base of mainly bleeding hearts. And in a different year, it was more in white colors. So everything from early on, from crocuses, from grape hyacinths, from daffodils to fritillarias and tulips, it was mainly white. But because only white is sometimes not very, it's a little bit too pure. So I added a little bit of red and orange with the help of varieties of tulips. And then in a different year, it was more the soft colors like pale yellow and pale pink. But it was also the year in which the hyacinth growers had asked, could they be part of these ribbons? Because before I only use the other bulbs that I've mentioned. And I don't like hyacinths because, in my view, they're very unnatural and too coarse. And if you know that at Keukenhof, to prevent those hyacinths from falling over, because they do that when they get too big, each hyacinth at the Keukenhof is supported by a steel kind of needle that they put in the top of the flower, and they push it until in the ground, and then it can't flop over. So that's what happened here as well. And they had their display of hyacinths, and I thought it looked rather nice, but it hadn't been my choice. But I had to, of course, to work with all kinds of growers at the Keukenhof, and so it was a really nice experience. I made very many different displays, which are also mentioned in this book that is not the latest book, but it's the newest book at this moment, and it has just come out here in the United States, and you can buy it later on if you want to. It's about all the information I've given you now. It's the way in which I work, the way I make the combinations. It's about bulbs for natural gardens, for more classic gardens, for in containers, for bouquets, everything you want to know. So that might be a suggestion for you. And then I also want to show you this book, which will be out in the first half of May. The 6th of May in the United States. My publisher is here, so she supports me sometimes. The Dutch publisher, no, because it has been, the Timber Press has been so nice to take it up into its collection. And so this will be the 6th of May. And this book will be about my garden, which you showed you in the first images in Weesp. And it's divided into 12 segments, each one for every month. And I write about how the garden was constructed, what the garden does to me, what I do to the garden, how we live together, because to me it feels like I'm living with that garden in each day of the year. And it also has a section about the projects that Jamie just mentioned in various different countries all over the world. So take a look at this too when it's out. And then I want to thank New York Botanical Garden to give me the opportunity to speak here today. And I want to also thank my Dutch and my American publisher to be able to make these books with me. And I all hope you had a very nice time. And I thank you for your attention.